Welcome back to A Clock in the Journal. Tonight the waves crash against the haunted shores of Sarek, where whispers of an ancient curse echo through the mist. A place where every shadow hides a secret, and every heartbeat might be your last. Step into the labyrinth of fate and deception, as Arsène Lupin dares to uncover the secret of Sarek. Chapter 6. All's Well. Walking erect, with a stiff and mechanical gait, without turning round to look at the abominable spectacle, without recking of what might happen if she were seen, Veronique went back to the priory. A single aim, a single hope sustained her, that of leaving the Isle of Sarek. She had had her fill of horror. Had she seen 3 corpses, 3 women who had had their throats cut, or been shot, or even hanged, she would not have felt, as she did now, that her whole being was in revolt. But this torture, was too much. It involved an ignominy, it was an act of sacrilege, a damnable performance which surpassed the bounds of wickedness. And then she was thinking of herself, the 4th and last victim. Fate seemed to be leading her towards that catastrophe, as a person condemned to death is pushed on to the scaffold. How could she do other than tremble with fear? How could she fail to read a warning in the choice of the hill of the great oak for the torture of the 3 sisters Archignat? She tried to find comfort in words. Everything will be explained. At the bottom of these hideous mysteries are quite simple causes, actions apparently fantastic, but in reality performed by beings of the same species as myself, who behave as they do from criminal motives, and in accordance with a determined plan. No doubt all this is only possible because of the war. The war brings about a peculiar state of affairs in which events of this kind are able to take place. But, all the same, there is nothing miraculous about it, nor anything inconsistent with the rules of ordinary life. Useless phrases. Vain attempts at argument which her brain found difficulty in following. In reality, upset as she was by violent nervous shocks, she came to think and feel like all those people of Sarek whose death she had witnessed. She shared their weakness, she was shaken by the same terrors, besieged by the same nightmares, unbalanced by the persistence within her of the instincts of bygone ages and lingering superstitions ever ready to rise to the surface. Who were these invisible beings who persecuted her? Whose mission was it to fill the 30 coffins of Sarek? Who was it that was wiping out all the inhabitants of the luckless island? Who was it that lived in caverns, gathering at the fateful hours the sacred mistletoe and the herbs of St. John, using axes and arrows and crucifying women? And in view of what horrible task, of what monstrous duty, in accordance with what inconceivable plans? Were they spirits of darkness, malevolent genii, priests of a dead religion, sacrificing men, women, and children to their bloodthirsty gods? "Enough, enough, or I shall go mad," she said aloud. "I must go. That must be my only thought, to get away from this hell." But it was as though destiny were taking special pains to torture her. On beginning her search for a little food, she suddenly noticed in her father's study, at the back of a cupboard, a drawing pinned to the wall, representing the same scene as the roll of paper which she had found near Maginac's body in the deserted cabin. A portfolio full of drawings lay on one of the shelves in the cupboard. She opened it. It contained a number of sketches of the same scene, likewise in red chalk. Each of them bore above the head of the first woman the inscription, V.D.H. One of them was signed, Antoine d'Ergemont. So it was her father who had made the drawing on Maginac's paper. It was her father who had tried in all these sketches to give the tortured woman a closer and closer resemblance to his own daughter. "Enough, enough," repeated Veronique. "I won't think. I won't reflect." Feeling very faint, she pursued her search but found nothing with which to stay her hunger. Nor did she find anything that would allow her to light a fire at the point of the island, though the fog had lifted and the signals would certainly have been observed. She tried rubbing 2 flints against each other, but she did not understand how to go to work, and she did not succeed. For 3 days she kept herself alive with water and wild grapes gathered among the ruins. Feverish and utterly exhausted, she had fits of weeping, which nearly every time produced the sudden appearance of all's well, and her physical suffering was such that she felt angry with the poor dog for having that ridiculous name and drove him away. All's well, greatly surprised, squatted on his haunches farther off and began to sit up again. She felt exasperated with him, as though he could help being Francois, dog. The least sound made her shake from head to foot and covered her with perspiration. What were the creatures in the great oak doing? From which side were they preparing to attack her? She hugged herself nervously, shuddering at the thought of falling into those monsters' hands, and could not keep herself from remembering that she was a beautiful woman, and that they might be tempted by her good looks and her youth. But, on the fourth day, a great hope uplifted her. She had found in a drawer a powerful reading glass. Taking advantage of the bright sunshine, she focused the rays upon a piece of paper which ended by catching fire and enabling her to light a candle. She believed that she was saved. She had discovered quite a stock of candles, which allowed her, to begin with, to keep the precious flame alive until the evening. At 11 o'clock she took a lantern and went towards the summer house, intending to set fire to it. It was a fine night, and the signal would be perceived from the coast. Fearing to be seen with her light, fearing above all the tragic vision of the sisters Archidonat, whose tragic Calvary was flooded by the moonlight, she took, on leaving the priory, another road, more to the left, and bordered with thickets. She walked anxiously, taking care not to rustle the leaves or stumble over the roots. When she reached open country not far from the summer house, she felt so tired that she had to sit down. Her head was buzzing. Her heart almost refused to beat. She could not see the place of execution from here either. But, on turning her eyes, despite herself, in the direction of the hill, she received the impression that something resembling a white figure had moved. It was in the very heart of the wood, at the end of an avenue which intersected the thick mass of trees on that side. The figure appeared again, in the full moonlight, and Veronique saw, notwithstanding the considerable distance, that it was the figure of a person clad in a robe and perched amid the branches of a tree which stood alone and higher than the others. She remembered what the sisters Archignat had said: "The 6th day of the moon is near at hand. They will climb the great oak and gather the sacred mistletoe." And she now remembered certain descriptions which she had read in books and different stories which her father had told her, and she felt as if she were present at one of those druid ceremonies which had appealed to her imagination as a child. But at the same time she felt so weak that she was not convinced that she was awake, or that the strange sight before her eyes was real. 4 other figures formed a group at the foot of the tree and raised their arms as though to catch the bough ready to fall. A light flashed above. The high priest's golden sickle had cut off the bunch of mistletoe. Then the high priest climbed down from the oak, and all 5 figures glided along the avenue, skirted the wood, and reached the top of the knoll. Veronique, who was unable to take her haggard eyes from those creatures, bent forward and saw the 3 corpses hanging each from its tree of torment. At the distance where she stood, the black bows of the caps looked like crows. The figures stopped opposite the victims as though to perform some incomprehensible rite. At last the high priest separated himself from the group and, holding the bunch of mistletoe in his hand, came down the hill and went towards the spot where the first arch of the bridge was anchored. Veronique was almost fainting. Her wavering eyes, before which everything seemed to dance, fastened on to the glittering sickle which swung from side to side on the priest's chest, below his long white beard. What was he going to do? Though the bridge no longer existed, Veronique was convulsed with anguish. Her legs refused to carry her. She lay down on the ground, keeping her eyes fixed upon the terrifying sight. On reaching the edge of the chasm, the priest again stopped for a few seconds. Then he stretched out the arm in which he carried the mistletoe, and preceded by the sacred plant as by a talisman which altered the laws of nature in his favor, he took a step forward above the yawning gulf, and he walked thus in space, all white in the moonlight. What happened, Veronique did not know, nor was she quite sure what had been happening, if she had not been the sport of an hallucination, nor at what stage of the strange ceremony this hallucination had originated in her enfeebled brain. She waited with closed eyes for events which did not take place and which, for that matter, she did not even try to foresee. But other, more real things preoccupied her mind. Her candle was going out inside the lantern. She was aware of this, and yet she had not the strength to pull herself together and return to the priory. And she said to herself that, if the sun should not shine again within the next few days, she would not be able to light the flame, and that she was lost. She resigned herself, weary of fighting, and realizing that she was defeated beforehand in this unequal contest. The only ending that was not to be endured was that of being captured. But why not abandon herself to the death that offered, death from starvation, from exhaustion? If you suffer long enough, there must come a moment when the suffering decreases, and when you pass, almost unconsciously, from life, which has grown too cruel, to death, which Veronique was gradually beginning to desire. That's it, she murmured. To go from Sarek or to die, it's all the same. What I want is to get away. A sound of leaves made her open her eyes. The flame of the candle was expiring. But behind the lantern Allswell was sitting, beating the air with his forepaws. And Veronique saw that he carried a packet of biscuits, fastened round his neck by a string. "Tell me your story, you dear old Allswell," said Veronique next morning, after a good night's rest in her bedroom at the Priory. "For, after all, I can't believe that you came to look for me and bring me food of your own accord. It was an accident, wasn't it? You were wandering in that direction, you heard me crying, and you came to me. But who tied that little box of biscuits round your neck? Does it mean that we have a friend in the island? A friend who takes an interest in us? Why doesn't he show himself? Speak and tell me, all's well." She kissed the dog and went on. "And whom were those biscuits intended for? For your master? For Francois? Or for Honorine? No? Then for Monsieur Stéphane, perhaps?" The dog wagged his tail and moved towards the door. He really seemed to understand. Veronique followed him to Stéphane Marou's room. Allswell slipped under the tutor's bed. There were 3 more cardboard boxes of biscuits, 2 packets of chocolate, and 2 tins of preserved meat. And each parcel was supplied with a string ending in a wide loop, from which Allswell must have released his head. "What does it mean?" asked Veronique, bewildered. "Did you put them under there? But who gave them to you? Have we actually a friend in the island who knows us and knows Stéphane Marou? Can you take me to him? He must live on this side of the island, because there is no means of communicating with the other, and you can't have been there." Veronique stopped to think. But in addition to the provisions stowed away by Allswell, she also noticed a small canvas-covered satchel under the bed, and she wondered why Stéphane Marou had hidden it. She thought that she had the right to open it and to look for some clue to the part played by the tutor, to his character, to his past perhaps, to his relations with Monsieur d'Ergemont and Francois. "Yes," she said, "it is my right and even my duty." Without hesitation she took a pair of big scissors and forced the frail lock. The satchel contained nothing but a manuscript book, with a rubber band round it. But the moment she opened the book, she stood amazed. On the first page was her own portrait, her photograph as a girl, with her signature in full and the inscription, "To my friend, Stéphane." I don't understand," she murmured. "I remember the photograph. I must have been 16. But how did I come to give it to him? I must have known him." Eager to learn more, she read the next page, a sort of preface worded as follows. "Veronique, I wish to lead my life under your eyes. In undertaking the education of your son, of that son whom I ought to loathe, because he is the son of another, but whom I love because he is your son, my intention is that my life shall be in full harmony with the secret feeling that has swayed it so long. One day I have no doubt you will resume your place as Francois, mother. On that day you will be proud of him. I shall have effaced all that may survive in him of his father, and I shall have exalted all the fine and noble qualities which he inherits from you. The aim is great enough for me to devote myself to it body and soul. I do so with gladness. Your smile shall be my reward." Veronique's heart was flooded with a singular emotion. Her life was lit with a calmer radiance, and this new mystery, which she was unable to fathom any more than the others, was at least, like that of Maginoc's flowers, gentle and comforting. As she continued to turn the pages, she followed her son's education from day to day. She beheld the pupil's progress and the master's methods. The pupil was engaging, intelligent, studious, zealous, loving, sensitive, impulsive, and at the same time thoughtful. The master was affectionate, patient, and borne up by some profound feeling which showed through every line of the manuscript. And, little by little, there was a growing enthusiasm in the daily confession, which expressed itself in terms less and less restrained. "Francois, my dearly beloved son, for I may call you so, may I not? Francois, your mother lives once again in you. Your eyes are pure and limpid as hers. Your soul is grave and simple as her soul. You are unacquainted with evil, and one might almost say that you are unacquainted with good, so closely is it blended with your beautiful nature." Some of the child's exercises were copied into the book, exercises in which he spoke of his mother with passionate affection and with the persistent hope that he would soon see her again. "We shall see her again, Francois," Stéphane added, "and you will then understand better what beauty means, and light, and the charm of life, and the delight of beholding and admiring." Next came anecdotes about Veronique, minor details which she herself did not remember, or which she thought that she alone knew. One day, at the Tuileries, she was only 16, a circle was formed round her by people who looked at her and wondered at her loveliness. Her girlfriends laughed, happy at seeing her admired. "Open her right hand, Francois. You will see a long, white scar in the middle of the palm." When she was quite a little girl, she ran the point of an iron railing into her hand. But the last pages were not written for the boy, and had certainly not been read by him. The writer's love was no longer disguised beneath admiring phrases. It displayed itself without reserve, ardent, exalted, suffering, quivering with hope, though always respectful. Veronique closed the book. She could read no more. "Yes, I confess all's well," she said to the dog, who was already sitting up. "My eyes are wet with tears. Devoid of feminine weaknesses as I am, I will tell you what I would say to nobody else. That really touches me. Yes, I must try to recall the unknown features of the man who loves me like this, some friend of my childhood whose affection I never suspected, and whose name has not left even a trace in my memory." She drew the dog to her. "Two kind hearts, are they not, all's well? Neither the master nor the pupil is capable of the crimes which I saw them commit. If they are the accomplices of our enemies here, they are so in spite of themselves, and without knowing it. I cannot believe in philters and incantations and plants which deprive you of your reason. But, all the same, there is something, isn't there, you dear little dog? The boy who planted Veronicas round the Calvary of Flowers, and who wrote Mother's Flowers, is not guilty, is he? And Honorine was right when she spoke of a fit of madness, and he will come back to look for me, won't he? Stéphane and he are sure to come back." The hours that went by were full of soothing quiet. Veronique was no longer lonely. The present had no terrors for her, and she had faith in the future. Next morning she said to All's Well, whom she had locked up to prevent his running away, "Will you take me there now, my man?" "Where?" "Why, to the friend, of course, who sent provisions to Stéphane Moreau. Come along." All's Well was only waiting for Veronique's permission. He dashed off in the direction of the grassy sward that led to the dolmen, and he stopped halfway. Veronique came up with him. He turned to the right and took a path which brought them to a huddle of ruins near the edge of the cliffs. Then he stopped again. "Is it here?" asked Veronique. The dog lay down flat. In front of him, at the foot of two blocks of stones leaning against each other and covered with the same growth of ivy, was a tangle of brambles with under it a little passage like the entrance to a rabbit warren. All's Well slipped in, disappeared, and then returned in search of Veronique, who had to go back to the priory and fetch a billhook to cut down the brambles. She managed in half an hour to uncover the top step of a staircase, which she descended, feeling her way and preceded by All's Well, and which took her to a long tunnel, cut in the body of the rock and lighted on the left by little openings. She raised herself on tiptoe and saw that these openings overlooked the sea. She walked on the level for 10 minutes and then went down some more steps. The tunnel grew narrower. The openings, which all looked towards the sky, no doubt so as not to be seen from below, now gave light from both the right and the left. Veronique began to understand how All's Well was able to communicate with the other part of the island. The tunnel followed the narrow strip of cliff which joined the priory estate to Sarek. The waves lapped the rocks on either side. They next climbed by steps under the knoll of the great oak. 2 tunnels opened at the top. All's Well chose the one on the left, which continued to skirt the sea. Then on the right there were 2 more passages, both quite dark. The island appeared to be riddled in this way with invisible communications, and Veronique felt something clutch at her heart as she reflected that she was making for the part which the sisters Arcagnan had described as the enemy's subterranean domains, under the Black Heath. All's Well trotted in front of her, turning round from time to time to see if she was following. "Yes, yes, dear, I'm coming," she whispered, "and I am not a bit afraid. I am sure that you are leading me to a friend who has taken shelter down here. But why has he not left his shelter? Why did you not show him the way?" The passage had been chipped smooth throughout, with a rounded ceiling and a very dry granite floor, which was amply ventilated by the openings. There was not a mark, not a scratch of any kind on the walls. Sometimes the point of a black flint projected. "Is it here?" asked Veronique, when All's Well stopped. The tunnel went no farther and widened into a chamber into which the light filtered more thinly through a narrower window. All's Well seemed undecided. He listened, with his ears pricked up, standing on his hind legs and resting his forepaws against the end wall of the tunnel. Veronique noticed that the wall, at this spot, was not formed throughout its length of the bare granite, but consisted of an accumulation of stones of unequal size set in cement. The work evidently belonged to a different, doubtless more recent period. A regular partition wall had been built, closing the underground passage, which was probably continued on the other side. She repeated, "It's here, isn't it?" But she said nothing more. She had heard the stifled sound of a voice. She went up to the wall and presently gave a start. The voice was raised higher. The sounds became more distinct. Someone, a child, was singing, and she caught the words. And the mother said, rocking her child to bed, "Weep not. If you do, the Virgin Mary weeps with you." Veronique murmured, "The song, the song." It was the same that Honorine had hummed at Begmail. Who could be singing it now? A child, imprisoned in the island? A boyfriend of Francois? And the voice went on. "Babes that laugh and sing, smiles to the Blessed Virgin bring, fold your hands this way, and to sweet Mary pray." The last verse was followed by a silence that lasted for a few minutes. All's Well appeared to be listening with increasing attention, as though something, which he knew of, was about to take place. Thereupon, just where he stood, there was a slight noise of stones carefully moved. All's Well wagged his tail frantically and barked, so to speak, in a whisper, like an animal that understands the danger of breaking the silence. And suddenly, about his head, one of the stones was drawn inward, leaving a fairly large aperture. All's Well leapt into the hole at a bound, stretched himself out and, helping himself with his hind legs, twisting and crawling, disappeared inside. "Ah, there's Master All's Well," said the young voice. "How are we, Master All's Well, and why didn't we come and pay our master a visit yesterday? Serious business, was it? A walk with Honorine? Oh, if you could talk, my dear old chap, what stories you would have to tell. And first of all, look here." Veronique, thrilled with excitement, had knelt down against the wall. Was it her son's voice that she heard? Was she to believe that he was back and in hiding? She tried in vain to see. The wall was thick, and there was a bend in the opening, but how clearly each syllable uttered, how plainly each intonation reached her ears. "Look here," repeated the boy. "Why doesn't Honorine come to set me free? Why don't you bring her here? You managed to find me all right. And grandfather must be worried about me. But what an adventure! So you're still of the same mind, eh, old chap? All's well, isn't it? All's as well can be. Veronique could not understand. Her son, for there was no doubt that it was Francois, her son was speaking as if he knew nothing of what had happened. Had he forgotten? Had his memory lost every trace of the deeds done during his fit of madness? Yes, a fit of madness, thought Veronique obstinately. He was mad. Honorine was quite right. He was undoubtedly mad. And his reason has returned. Oh, Francois, Francois! She listened, with all her tense being and all her trembling soul, to the words that might bring her so much gladness or such an added load of despair. Either the darkness would close in upon her more thickly and heavily than ever, or daylight was to pierce that endless night in which she had been struggling for 15 years. "Why, yes," continued the boy, "I agree with you, all's well, but all the same, I should be jolly glad if you could bring me some real proof of it. On the one hand, there's no news of grandfather or Honorine, though I've given you lots of messages for them. On the other hand, there's no news of Stéphane. And that's what alarms me. Where is he? Where have they locked him up? Won't he be starving by now? Come, all's well. Tell me, where did you take the biscuits yesterday? But, look here, what's the matter with you? You seem to have something on your mind. What are you looking at over there? Do you want to go away? No? Then what is it?" The boy stopped. Then, after a moment, in a much lower voice, "Did you come with someone?" he asked. "Is there anybody behind the wall?" The dog gave a dull bark. Then there was a long pause, during which Francois also must have been listening. Veronique's emotion was so great that it seemed to her that Francois must hear the beating of her heart. He whispered, "Is that you, Honorine?" There was a fresh pause, and he continued, "Yes, I'm sure it's you. I can hear you breathing. Why don't you answer?" Veronique was carried away by a sudden impulse. Certain gleams of light had flashed upon her mind, since she had understood that Stéphane was a prisoner, no doubt like Francois, therefore a victim of the enemy, and all sorts of vague suppositions flitted through her brain. Besides, how could she resist the appeal of that voice? Her son was asking her a question. Her son! "Francois! Francois!" she stammered. "Ah," he said, "there's an answer. I knew it. Is it you, Honorine?" "No, Francois," she said. "Then who is it?" "A friend of Honorine's. I don't know you, do I?" "No, but I am your friend." He hesitated. "Was he on his guard? Why didn't Honorine come with you?" Veronique was not prepared for this question, but she at once realized that, if the involuntary suppositions that were forcing themselves upon her were correct, the boy must not yet be told the truth. She therefore said, "Honorine came back from her journey, but has gone away again." "Gone to look for me?" That's it," she said quickly. "She thought that you had been carried away from Sarek and your tutor with you." "But grandfather?" "He's gone too. So have all the inhabitants of the island." "Ah, the old story of the coffins and the crosses, I suppose?" "Just so. They thought that your disappearance meant the beginning of the disasters, and their fear made them take to flight." "But you, madame?" "I have known Honorine for a long time. I came from Paris with her to take a holiday at Sarek. I have no reason to go away. All these superstitions have no terrors for me." The child was silent. The improbability and inadequacy of the replies must have been apparent to him, and his suspicions increased in consequence. He confessed as much frankly. "Listen, madame, there's something I must tell you. It's 10 days since I was imprisoned in this cell. During the first part of that time I saw and heard nobody. But since the day before yesterday, every morning a little wicket opens in the middle of my door, and a woman's hand comes through and gives a fresh supply of water. A woman's hand. So, you see? So you want to know if that woman is myself? Yes, I am obliged to ask you. Would you recognize that woman's hand?" "Yes, it is lean and bony, with a yellow arm. "Here's mine," said Veronique. "It can pass where all's well did." She pulled up her sleeve, and by flexing her bare arm she easily passed it through. "Oh," said Francois at once, "that's not the hand I saw." And he added, in a lower voice, "How pretty this one is." Suddenly Veronique felt him take it in his own, with a quick movement, and he exclaimed, "Oh, it can't be true, it can't be true." He had turned her hand over and was separating the fingers so as to uncover the palm entirely. And he whispered, "The scar, it's there, the white scar." Then Veronique became greatly agitated. She remembered Stéphane Maroux's diary and certain details set down by him which Francois must have heard. One of these details was this scar, which recalled an old and rather serious injury. She felt the boy's lips pressed to her hand, first gently and then with passionate ardor and a great flow of tears, and heard him stammering, "Oh, mother, mother darling, my dear, dear mother." Chapter 7. Francois and Stéphane. Long the mother and son remained thus, kneeling against the wall that divided them, yet as close together as though they were able to see each other with their frenzied eyes and to mingle their tears and kisses. They spoke both at once, asking each other questions and answering them at random. They were in a transport of delight. The life of each flowed over into the other's life, and became swallowed up in it. No power on earth could now dissolve their union or break the bonds of love and confidence which unite mothers and sons. "Yes, all's well, old man," said Francois. "You may sit up as much and as long as you like. We are really crying this time, and you will be the first to get tired, for one doesn't mind shedding such tears as these, does one, mother?" As for Veronique, her mind retained not a vestige of the terrible visions which had dismayed it. Her son a murderer, her son killing and massacring people, she no longer admitted any of that. She did not even admit the excuse of madness. Everything would be explained in some other way, which she was not even in a hurry to understand. She thought only of her son. He was there. His eyes saw her through the wall. His heart beat against hers. He lived. And he was the same gentle, affectionate, pure, and charming child that her maternal dreams had pictured. "My son, my son," she kept on repeating, as though she could not utter those marvelous words often enough. "My son, it's you! It's you! I believed you dead, 1,000 times dead, more dead than it is possible to be. And you are alive. And you are here. And I am touching you. Oh, heaven, can it be true? I have a son, and my son is alive." And he, on his side, took up the refrain with the same passionate fervor. "Mother, mother, I have waited for you so long. To me you were not dead, but it was so sad to be a child, and to have no mother, to see the years go by, and to waste them in waiting for you." For an hour they talked at random, of the past, of the present, of 100 subjects which at first appeared to them the most interesting things in the world, and which they forthwith dropped, to ask each other more questions, and to try to know each other a little better, and to enter more deeply into the secret of their lives and the privacy of their souls. It was Francois who first attempted to impart some little method to their conversation. "Listen, mother, we have so much to say to each other that we must give up trying to say it all today, and even for days and days. Let us speak now of what is essential and in the fewest possible words, for we have perhaps not much time before us." "What do you mean?" said Veronique, instantly alarmed. "I have no intention of leaving you." "But, mother, if we are not to leave each other, we must first be united. Now there are many obstacles to be overcome, even if it were only the wall that separates us. Besides, I am very closely watched, and I may be obliged at any moment to send you away, as I do all's well, at the first sound of footsteps approaching." "Watched by whom?" "By those who fell upon Stéphane and me on the day when we discovered the entrance to these caves, under the heath on the tableland, the Black Heath." "Did you see them?" "No, it was too dark." But who are they? Who are those enemies? I don't know. You suspect, of course? The Druids? He said, laughing. The people of old, of whom the legends speak? Rather not. Ghosts? Not that either. They were just simply creatures of today, creatures of flesh and blood. They live down here, though? Most likely. And you took them by surprise? No, on the contrary. They seemed even to be expecting us, and to be lying in wait for us. We had gone down a stone staircase and a very long passage, lined with perhaps 80 caves, or rather 80 cells. The doors, which were of wood, were open, and the cells overlooked the sea. It was on the way back, as we were going up the staircase again in the dark, that we were seized from one side, knocked down, bound, blindfolded and gagged. The whole thing did not take a minute. I suspect that we were carried back to the end of the long passage. When I succeeded in removing my bonds and my bandage, I found that I was locked in one of the cells, probably the last in the passage. And I have been here 10 days. My poor darling, how you must have suffered. No, Mother, and in any case not from hunger. There was a whole stack of provisions in one corner and a truss of straw in another to lie on. So I waited quietly. For whom? You promise not to laugh, Mother? Laugh at what, dear? At what I'm going to tell you? How can you think, ? Well, I was waiting for someone who had heard of all the stories of Sarek and who promised grandfather to come. But who was it? The boy hesitated. No, I am sure you will make fun of me, Mother. I'll tell you later. Besides, he never came. Though I thought for a moment. Yes, fancy, I had managed to remove 2 stones from the wall, and to open this hole of which my jailers evidently didn't know. All of a sudden, I heard a noise, someone scratching. It was All's Well. It was Master Allswell coming by the other road. You can imagine the welcome he received. Only what astonished me was that nobody followed him this way, neither Honorine nor grandfather. I had no pencil or paper to write to them, but after all, they had only to follow All's Well. That was impossible, said Veronique, because they believed you to be far away from Sarek, carried off, no doubt, and because your grandfather had left. Just so. Why believe anything of the sort? Grandfather knew, from a lately discovered document, where we were, for it was he who told us of the possible entrance to the underground passage. Didn't he speak to you about it? Veronique had been very happy in listening to her son's story. As he had been carried off and imprisoned, he was not the atrocious monster who had killed him. D'Ergemont, Maurice Leblanc, Honorine, and Courageux and his companions. The truth, which she had already vaguely surmised, now assumed a more definite form, and, though still thickly shrouded, was visible in its essential part. Francois was not guilty. Someone had put on his clothes and impersonated him, even as someone else, in the semblance of Stéphane, had pretended to be Stéphane. Ah, what did all the rest matter? The improbabilities and inconsistencies, the proofs and certainties. Veronique did not even think about it. The only thing that counted was the innocence of her beloved son. And so she still refused to tell him anything that would sadden him and spoil his happiness. And she said, "No, I have not seen your grandfather. Honorine wanted to prepare him for my visit, but things happened so hurriedly." "And you were left alone on the island, poor mother? So you hope to find me here?" "Yes," she said, after a moment's hesitation. "Alone, but with All's Well, of course." "Yes. I hardly paid any attention to him during the first days. It was not until this morning that I thought of following him." "And where does the road start from that brought you here?" "It's an underground passage, the outlet of which is concealed between 2 stones near Maginoc's garden." "What? Then the 2 islands communicate?" "Yes, by the cliff underneath the bridge." "How strange! That's what neither Stéphane not, I guessed, nor anybody else for that matter, except our dear All's Well, when it came to finding his master." He interrupted himself and then whispered, "Hark! But the next moment he said, "No, it's not that yet. Still, we must hurry." "What am I to do?" "It's quite simple, Mother. When I made this hole, I saw that it could be widened easily enough, if it were possible also to take out the 3 or 4 stones next to it. But these are firmly fixed, and we should need an implement of some kind." "Well, I'll go and—" "Yes, do, Mother. Go back to the priory. To the left of the house, in a basement, is a sort of workshop where Magenuk kept his garden tools. You will find a small pickaxe there, with a very short handle. Bring it me in the evening. I will work during the night, and tomorrow morning I shall give you a kiss, Mother." "Oh, it sounds too good to be true." "I promise you I shall. Then all that we shall have to do will be to release Stéphane." "Your tutor? Do you know where he is shut up?" "I do almost know. According to the particulars which grandfather gave us, the underground passages consist of 2 floors, one above the other, and the last cell of each is fitted as a prison. I occupy one of them. Stéphane should occupy the other, below mine. What worries me?" "What is it?" "Well, it's this. According to grandfather again, these 2 cells were once torture chambers. Death chambers was the word grandfather used." "Oh, but how alarming!" "Why alarm yourself, Mother? You see that they are not thinking of torturing me. Only, on the off chance, and not knowing what sort of fate was in store for Stéphane, I sent him something to eat by All's Well, who is sure to have found a way of getting to him." "No," she said. All's Well did not understand. "How do you know, Mother?" "He thought you were sending him to Stéphane Maroux's room, and he heaped it all under the bed." "Oh," said the boy anxiously. "What can have become of Stéphane?" And he at once added, "You see, Mother, that we must hurry, if we would save Stéphane and save ourselves." "What are you afraid of?" "Nothing, if you act quickly." "But still—" "Nothing, I assure you. I feel certain that we shall get the better of every obstacle. And if any others present themselves, dangers which we cannot foresee—" "It is then," said Francois, laughing, "that the man whom I am expecting will come and protect us. You see, my darling, you yourself admit the need of assistance. ... Why, no, Mother, I am trying to ease your mind, but nothing will happen. Come, how would you have a son who has just found his mother lose her again at once? It isn't possible. In real life, maybe. But we are not living in real life. We are absolutely living in a romance. And in romances, things always come right. You ask All's Well. It's so, old chap, isn't it? We shall win and be united and live happy ever after? That's what you think, All's Well. Then be off, old chap, and take Mother with you. I'm going to fill up the hole in case they come and inspect my cell. And be sure not to try and come in when the hole is stopped, eh? All's Well? That's when the danger is. Go, Mother, and don't make a noise when you come back." Veronique was not long away. She found the pickaxe, and, 40 minutes after, brought it and managed to slip it into the cell. "No one has been yet," said Francois, "but they are certain to come soon, and you had better not stay. I may have a night's work before me, especially as I shall have to stop because of likely visits, so I shall expect you at 7 o'clock tomorrow. By the way, talking of Stéphane, I have been thinking it over. Some noises which I heard just now confirmed my notion that he is shut up more or less underneath me. The opening that lights my cell is too narrow for me to pass through. Is there a fairly wide window at the place where you are now? No, but it can be widened by removing the little stones round it. Capital. You will find in Magenuk's workshop a bamboo ladder with iron hooks to it, which you can easily bring with you tomorrow morning. Next, take some provisions and some rugs, and leave them in a thicket at the entrance to the tunnel." "What for, darling?" "You'll see. I have a plan. Goodbye, Mother. Have a good night's rest, and pick up your strength. We may have a hard day before us." Veronique followed her son's advice. The next morning, full of hope, she once more took the road to the cell. This time, All's Well, reverting to his instincts of independence, did not come with her. "Keep quite still, mother," said Francois in so low a whisper that she could scarcely hear him. "I am very closely watched, and I think there's someone walking up and down in the passage. However, my work is nearly done. The stones are all loosened. I shall have finished in 2 hours. Have you the ladder?" "Yes." "Remove the stones from the window. That will save time. For really I am frightened about Stéphane. And be sure not to make a noise." Veronique moved away. The window was not much more than 3 feet from the floor, and the small stones, as she had supposed, were kept in place only by their own weight and the way in which they were arranged. The opening which she thus contrived to make was very wide, and she easily passed the ladder which she had brought with her through, and secured it by its iron hooks to the lower ledge. She was some 100 feet or so above the sea, which lay all white before her, guarded by the 1,000 reefs of Sarek. But she could not see the foot of the cliff, for there was under the window a slight projection of granite which jutted forward, and on which the ladder rested instead of hanging perpendicularly. "That will help Francois," she thought. Nevertheless, the danger of the undertaking seemed great, and she wondered whether she herself ought not to take the risk instead of her son. All the more so as Francois might be mistaken, as Stéphane's cell was perhaps not there at all, and as perhaps there was no means of entering it by a similar opening. If so, what a waste of time, and what a useless danger for the boy to run. At that moment she felt so great a need of self-devotion, so intense a wish to prove her love for him by direct action, that she formed her resolution without pausing to reflect, even as one performs immediately a duty which there is no question of not performing. Nothing deterred her, neither her inspection of the ladder, whose hooks were not wide enough to grip the whole thickness of the ledge, nor the sight of the precipice, which gave an impression that everything was about to fall away from under her. She had to act, and she acted. Pinning up her skirt, she stepped across the wall, turned round, supported herself on the ledge, groped with her foot in space, and found one of the rungs. Her whole body was trembling. Her heart was beating furiously, like the clapper of a bell. Nevertheless, she had the mad courage to catch hold of the 2 uprights and go down. It did not take long. She knew that there were 20 rungs in all. She counted them. When she reached the 20th, she looked to the left and murmured, with unspeakable joy, "Oh, Francois, my darling!" She had seen, 3 feet away at most, a recess, a hollow, which appeared to be the entrance to a cavity cut in the rock itself. Stéphane. Stéphane. She called, but in so faint a voice that Stéphane Moreau, if he were there, could not hear her. She hesitated a few seconds, but her legs were giving way, and she no longer had the strength either to climb up again or to remain hanging where she was. Taking advantage of a few irregularities in the rock, and thus shifting the ladder, at the risk of unhooking it, she succeeded, by a sort of miracle of which she was quite aware, in catching hold of a flint which projected from the granite and setting foot in the cave. Then, with fierce energy, she made one supreme effort, and recovering her balance with a jerk, she entered. She at once saw someone, fastened with cords, lying on a truss of straw. The cave was small and not very deep, especially in the upper portion, which pointed towards the sky rather than the sea, and which must have looked, from a distance, like a mere fold in the cliff. There was no projection to bound it at the edge. The light entered freely. Veronique went nearer. The man did not move. He was asleep. She bent over him. Though she did not recognize him for certain, it seemed to her that a memory was emerging from that dim past in which all the faces of our childhood gradually fade away. This one was surely not unknown to her, a gentle visage, with regular features, fair hair flung well back, a broad white forehead and a slightly feminine countenance, which reminded Veronique of the charming face of a convent friend who had died before the war. She deftly unfastened the bonds with which the wrists were fastened together. The man, without waking immediately, stretched his arms, as though submitting himself to a familiar operation, not effected for the first time, which did not necessarily interfere with his sleep. Presumably he was released like this at intervals, perhaps in order to eat and at night, for he ended by muttering, "So early, but I'm not hungry, and it's still light." This last reflection astonished the man himself. He opened his eyes and at once sat up where he lay, so that he might see the person who was standing in front of him, no doubt, for the first time in broad daylight. He was not greatly surprised, for the reason that the reality could not have been manifest to him at once. He probably thought that he was the sport of a dream or an hallucination, and he said, in an undertone, "Véronique, Véronique." She felt a little embarrassed by his gaze, but finished releasing his bonds, and when he distinctly felt her hand on his own hands and on his imprisoned limbs, he understood the wonderful event which her presence implied, and he said in a faltering voice, "You! You! Can it be? Oh, speak just one word, just one. Can it possibly be you?" He continued, almost to himself, "Yes, it is she. It is certainly she. She is here." And, anxiously aloud, "You! At night. On the other nights. It wasn't you who came then. It was another woman, wasn't it? An enemy? Oh, forgive me for asking you. It's because I don't understand. How did you come here?" "I came this way," she said, pointing to the sea. "Oh," he said, "how wonderful!" He stared at her with dazed eyes, as he might have stared at some vision descended from heaven, and the circumstances were so unusual that he did not think of suppressing the eagerness of his gaze. She repeated, utterly confused, "Yes, this way. Francois suggested it." "I did not mention him," he said, "because, with you here, I felt sure that he was free." "Not yet," she said. "But he will be in an hour." A long pause ensued. She interrupted it to conceal her agitation. "He will be free. You shall see him. But we must not frighten him. There are things which he doesn't know." She perceived that he was listening not to the words uttered, but to the voice that uttered them, and that this voice seemed to plunge him into a sort of ecstasy, for he was silent and smiled. She thereupon smiled too and questioned him, thus obliging him to answer. "You called me by my name at once, so you knew me. I also seem to—" "Yes, you remind me of a friend of mine who died." "Madeleine Ferrand?" "Yes, Madeleine Ferrand. Perhaps I also remind you of her brother, a shy schoolboy who used often to visit the parlor at the convent and who used to look at you from a distance." "Yes, yes," she declared. "I remember. We even spoke to each other sometimes. You used to blush. Yes, that's it. Your name was Stéphane. But how do you come to be called Maru?" "Madeleine and I were not children of the same father." "Ah," she said, "that was what misled me." She gave him her hand. "Well, Stéphane," she said, "as we are old friends and have renewed our acquaintance, let us put off all our remembrances until later. For the moment, the most urgent matter is to get away. Have you the strength?" "The strength, yes. I have not had such a very bad time." "But how are we to go from here?" "By the same road by which I came, a ladder communicating with the upper passage of cells." He was now standing up. "You had the courage, the pluck?" he asked, at last realizing what she had dared to do. "Oh, it was not very difficult," she declared. "Francois was so anxious. He maintained that you were both occupying old torture chambers, death chambers." It was as though these words aroused him violently from a dream, and made him suddenly see that it was madness to converse in such circumstances. "Go away," he cried. "Francois is right. Oh, if you knew the risk you are running. Please, please go." He was beside himself as though convulsed by the thought of an immediate peril. She tried to calm him, but he entreated her. "Another second may be your undoing. Don't stay here." I am condemned to death, and to the most terrible death. Look at the ground on which we are standing, this sort of floor. But it's no use talking about it. Oh, please do go." "With you," she said. "Yes, with me. But save yourself first," she resisted and said firmly. "For us both to be saved, Stéphane, we must above all things remain calm. What I did just now we can do again, only by calculating all our actions and controlling our excitement. Are you ready?" "Yes," he said, overcome by her magnificent confidence. "Then, follow me." She stepped to the very edge of the precipice and leant forward. "Give me your hand," she said, "to help me keep my balance." She turned round, flattened herself against the cliff, and felt the surface with her free hand. Not finding the ladder, she leant outward slightly. The ladder had become displaced. No doubt when Veronique, perhaps with too abrupt a movement, had set foot in the cave, the iron hook of the right-hand upright had slipped, and the ladder, hanging only by the other hook, had swung like a pendulum. The bottom rungs were now out of reach. Chapter 8. Anguish. Had Veronique been alone, she would have yielded to one of those moods of despondency, which her nature, brave though it was, could not escape in the face of the unrelenting animosity of fate. But in the presence of Stéphane, who she felt to be the weaker and who was certainly exhausted by his captivity, she had the strength to restrain herself and announce, as though mentioning quite an ordinary incident, "The ladder has swung out of our reach." Stéphane looked at her in dismay. Then we are lost." "Why should we be lost?" she asked with a smile. "There is no longer any hope of getting away." "What do you mean?" "Of course there is. What about Francois?" "Francois?" "Certainly. In an hour at most, Francois will have made his escape. And when he sees the ladder and the way I came, he will call to us. We shall hear him easily. We have only to be patient." "To be patient," he said in terror. "To wait for an hour! But they are sure to be here in less than that. They keep a constant watch. Well, we will manage somehow." He pointed to the wicket in the door. "Do you see that wicket?" he said. "They open it each time. They will see us through the grating. There's a shutter to it. Let's close it. They will come in. Then we won't close it, and we'll keep up our confidence, Stéphane. I'm frightened for you, not for myself. You mustn't be frightened either for me or for yourself. If the worst comes to the worst, we are able to defend ourselves," she added, showing him a revolver which she had taken from her father's rack of arms and carried on her ever since. "Ah," he said, "what I fear is that we shall not even be called upon to defend ourselves. They have other means." "What means?" He did not answer. He had flung a quick glance at the floor, and Veronique for a moment examined its curious structure. All around, following the circumference of the walls, was the granite itself, rugged and uneven. But outlined in the granite was a large square. They could see, on each of the four sides, the deep crevice that divided it from the rest. The timbers of which it consisted were worn and grooved, full of cracks and gashes, but nevertheless massive and powerful. The fourth side almost skirted the edge of the precipice, from which it was divided by 8 inches at most. "A trap door?" she asked, with a shudder. "No, not that," he said. "It would be too heavy." "Then what?" "I don't know. Very likely it is nothing but a remnant of some past contrivance which no longer works. Still." "Still what?" "Last night, or rather this morning, there was a creaking sound down below there. It seemed to suggest attempts, but they stopped at once. It's such a long time since." "No, the thing no longer works, and they can't make use of it." "Who's they?" Without waiting for his answer, she continued. "Listen, Stéphane, we have a few minutes before us, perhaps fewer than we think. Francois will be free at any moment now, and will come to our rescue. Let us make the most of the interval, and tell each other the things which both of us ought to know." Let us discuss matters quietly. We are threatened with no immediate danger, and the time will be well employed." Veronique was pretending a sense of security which she did not feel. That Francois would make his escape she refused to doubt, but who could tell that the boy would go to the window and notice the hook of the hanging ladder? Unfailing to see his mother, would he not rather think of following the underground tunnel and running to the priory? However, she mastered herself, feeling the need of the explanation for which she had asked, and sitting down on a granite projection, which formed a sort of bench, she at once began to tell Stéphane the events which she had witnessed, and in which she had played a leading part, from the moment when her investigations led her to the deserted cabin containing Maguenoc's dead body. Stéphane listened to the terrifying narrative without attempting to interrupt her, but with an alarm marked by his gestures of abhorrence and the despairing expression of his face. Monsieur d'Egemont's death, in particular, seemed to crush him, as did Honorine's. He had been greatly attached to both of them. "There, Stéphane," said Veronique, when she had described the anguish which she suffered after the execution of the sisters Archignan, the discovery of the underground passage, and her interview with Francois. "That is all that I need absolutely tell you. I thought that you ought to know what I have kept from Francois, so that we may fight our enemies together." He shook his head. "Which enemies?" he said. "I, too, in spite of your explanations, am asking the very question which you asked me. I have a feeling that we are flung into the midst of a great tragedy which has continued for years, for centuries, and in which we have begun to play our parts only at the moment of the crisis, at the moment of the terrific cataclysm prepared by generations of men. I may be wrong. Perhaps there is nothing more than a disconnected series of sinister, weird, and horrible coincidences, amid which we are tossed from side to side, without being able to appeal to any other reasons than the whim of chance. In reality, I know no more than you do. I am surrounded by the same obscurity, stricken by the same sorrows and the same losses. It's all just insanity, extravagant convulsions, unprecedented shocks, the crimes of savages, the fury of the barbaric ages." Veronique agreed. "Yes, of the barbaric ages, and that is what baffles me most and impresses me so much. What is the connection between the present and the past, between our persecutors of today and the men who lived in these caves in days of old, and whose actions are prolonged into our own time, in a manner so impossible to understand? To what do they all refer, those legends of which I know nothing except from Honorine's delirium and the distress of the sisters Archignat?" They spoke low, with their ears always on the alert. Stéphane listened for sounds in the corridor. Veronique concentrated her attention on the cliff, in the hope of hearing Francois' signal. "They are very complicated legends," said Stéphane, "very obscure traditions in which we must abandon any attempt to distinguish between what is superstition and what might be truth. Out of this jumble of old wives' tales, the very most that we can disentangle is two sets of ideas, those referring to the prophecy of the 30 coffins, and those relating to the existence of a treasure, or rather of a miraculous stone." "Then they take as a prophecy," said Veronique, "the words which I read on Maguenoc's drawing and again on the fairies, dolmen?" "Yes, a prophecy which dates back to an indeterminate period, and which for centuries has governed the whole history and the whole life of Sarek. The belief has always prevailed that a day would come when, within a space of 12 months, the 30 principal reefs which surround the island, and which are called the 30 coffins, would receive their 30 victims, who were to die a violent death, and that those 30 victims would include 4 women who were to die crucified. It is an established and undisputed tradition, handed down from father to son, and everybody believes in it. It is expressed in the line and part of a line inscribed on the fairies, dolmen. 4 women crucified and, for 30 coffins, victims 30 times. Very well, but people have gone on living all the same, normally and peaceably. Why did the outburst of terror suddenly take place this year? Maguenoc was largely responsible. Maguenoc was a fantastic and rather mysterious person, a mixture of the wizard and the bone-setter, the healer and the charlatan, who had studied the stars in their courses and whom people liked to consult about the most remote events of the past as well as the future. Now Magenuk announced not long ago that 1917 would be the fateful year. Why? Intuition perhaps, presentiment, divination, or subconscious knowledge. You can choose any explanation that you please. As for Magenuk, who did not despise the practices of the most antiquated magic, he would tell you that he knew it from the flight of a bird or the entrails of a fowl. However, his prophecy was based on something more serious. He pretended, quoting evidence collected in his childhood among the old people of Sarek, that, at the beginning of the last century, the first line of the inscription on the fairies, Dolmen was not yet obliterated, and that it formed this, which would rhyme with, 4 women shall be crucified on tree, in Sarek's Isle, in year 14 and 3. The year 14 and 3 is the year 17, and the prediction became more impressive for Magenuk and his friends of late years, because the total number was divided into 2 numbers, and the war broke out in 1914. From that day, Magenuk grew more and more important, and more sure of the truth of his provisions. For that matter, he also grew more and more anxious, and he even announced that his death, followed by the death of Monsieur d'Ergemont, would give the signal for the catastrophe. Then the year 1917 arrived and produced a genuine terror in the island. The events were close at hand. And still, said Veronique, and still it was all absurd. Absurd, yes, but it all acquired a curiously disturbing significance on the day when Magenuk was able to compare the scraps of prophecy engraved on the dolmen with the complete prophecy. Then he succeeded in doing so? Yes. He discovered under the abbey ruins, in a heap of stones which had formed a sort of protecting chamber round it, an old, worn, and tattered missal, which had a few of its pages in good condition, however, and one in particular, the one which you saw, or rather of which you saw a copy in the deserted cabin. A copy made by my father? By your father, as were all those in the cupboard in his study. Monsieur d'Ergemont, you must remember, was fond of drawing, of painting watercolors. He copied the illuminated page, but of the prophecy that accompanied the drawing he reproduced only the words inscribed on the fairies, Dolmen. How do you account for the resemblance between the crucified woman and myself? I never saw the original, which Magenuk gave to Monsieur d'Ergemont and which your father kept jealously in his room. But Monsieur d'Ergemont maintained that the resemblance was there. In any case, he accentuated it in his drawing, in spite of himself, remembering all that you had suffered. And through his fault, he said. Perhaps, murmured Veronique. He was also thinking of the other prophecy that was once made to Vorsky. You will perish by the hand of a friend, and your wife will be crucified. So I suppose the strange coincidence struck him, and even made him write the initials of my maiden name, V. Demh, at the top. And she added, and all this happened in accordance with the wording of the inscription. ... They were both silent. How could they do other than think of that inscription, of the words written ages ago on the pages of the missal and on the stone of the dolmen? If destiny had as yet provided only 27 victims for the 30 coffins of Sarek, were the last 3 not there, ready to complete the sacrifice, all 3 imprisoned, all 3 captive, and in the power of the sacrificial murderers? And if, at the top of the knoll, near the grand oak, there were as yet but 3 crosses, would the 4th not soon be prepared to receive a 4th victim? Francois is a very long time, said Veronique presently. She went to the edge and looked over. The ladder had not moved and was still out of reach. The others will soon be coming to my door, said Stéphane. I am surprised that they haven't been yet. But they did not wish to confess their mutual anxiety, and Veronique put a further question in a calm voice. And the treasure? The Godstone? That riddle is hardly less obscure, said Stéphane, and also depends entirely on the last line of the inscription. The Godstone, which gives life or death. What is this Godstone? Tradition says that it is a miraculous stone, and, according to Monsieur d'Ergemont, this belief dates back to the remotest periods. People at Sarek have always had faith in the existence of a stone capable of working wonders. In the Middle Ages they used to bring puny and deformed children and lay them on the stone for days and nights together, after which the children got up strong and healthy. Barren women resorted to this remedy with good results, as did old men, wounded men, and all sorts of degenerates. Only it came about that the place of pilgrimage underwent changes, the stone, still according to tradition, having been moved, and even, according to some, having disappeared. In the 18th century, people venerated the fairies, dolmen, and used, still sometimes, to expose scrofulous children there. But, said Veronique, the stone also had harmful properties, for it gave death as well as life. Yes, if you touched it without the knowledge of those whose business it was to guard it and keep it sacred. But in this respect, the mystery becomes still more complicated, for there is the question also of a precious stone, a sort of fantastic gem which shoots out flames, burns those who wear it, and makes them suffer the tortures of the damned. That's what happened to Maguenoc by Honorine's account, said Veronique. Yes, replied Stéphane, but here we are entering upon the present. So far I have been speaking of the fabled past, the two legends, the prophecy, and the Godstone. Maguenoc's adventure opens up the period of the present day, which, for that matter, is hardly less obscure than the ancient period. What happened to Maguenoc? We shall probably never know. He had been keeping in the background for a week, gloomy and doing no work, when suddenly he burst into Monsieur d'Ergemont's study roaring, "I've touched it! I'm done for! I've touched it! I took it in my hand. It burnt me like fire, but I wanted to keep it. Oh, it's been gnawing into my bones for days. It's hell! It's hell!" And he showed us the palm of his hand. It was all burnt, as though eaten up with cancer. We tried to dress it for him, but he seemed quite mad and kept rambling on. I'm the first victim. The fire will go to my heart. And after me, the others. Turn will come. That same evening, he cut off his hand with a hatchet. And a week later, after infecting the whole island with terror, he went away. Where did he go to? To the village of Le Fouet, on a pilgrimage to the chapel of St. Barbe, near the place where you found his dead body. Who killed him, do you think? Undoubtedly one of the creatures who used to correspond by means of signs written along the road. One of the creatures who live hidden in the cells, and who are pursuing some purpose which I don't understand. Those who attacked you and Francois, therefore? Yes, and immediately afterwards, having stolen and put on our clothes, played the parts of Francois and myself. With what object? To enter the priory more easily, and then, if their attempt failed, to balk inquiry. But haven't you seen them since they have kept you here? I have seen only a woman, or rather caught a glimpse of her. She comes at night. She brings me food and drink, unties my hands, loosens the fastenings round my legs a little, and comes back 2 hours after. Has she spoken to you? Once only, on the first night, in a low voice, to tell me that, if I called out or uttered a sound or tried to escape, Francois would pay the penalty. But, when they attacked you, couldn't you then make out? ? No, I saw no more than Francois did. And the attack was quite unexpected? Yes, quite. M. d'Ergemont had that morning received 2 important letters on the subject of the investigation which he was making into all these facts. One of the letters, written by an old Breton nobleman well known for his royalist leanings, was accompanied by a curious document which he had found among his great-grandfather's papers, a plan of some underground cells which the Chouans used to occupy in Sarek. It was evidently the same druid dwellings of which the legends tell us. The plan showed the entrance on the Black Heath and marked 2 stories, each ending in a torture chamber. Francois and I went out exploring together, and we were attacked on our way back. And you have made no discovery since? No, none at all. But Francois spoke of a rescue which he was expecting, someone who had promised his assistance. Oh, a piece of boyish nonsense, an idea of Francois, which, as it happened, was connected with the second letter which Monsieur d'Ergemont received that morning. And what was it about? Stéphane did not reply at once. Something made him think that they were being spied on through the door. But, on going to the wicket, he saw no one in the passage outside. Ah, he said. If we are to be rescued, the sooner it happens the better. They may come at any moment now. Is any help really possible? Asked Veronique. Well, Stéphane answered, we must not attach too much importance to it, but it's rather curious all the same. You know, Sarek has often been visited by officers or inspectors with a view to exploring the rocks and beaches around the island, which were quite capable of concealing a submarine base. Last time, the special delegate sent from Paris, a wounded officer, Captain Patrice Belval, became friendly with Monsieur d'Ergemont, who told him the legend of Sarek and the apprehension which we were beginning to feel in spite of everything. It was the day after Maguignac went away. The story interested Captain Belval so much that he promised to speak of it to one of his friends in Paris, a Spanish or Portuguese nobleman, Don Luis Pereira, an extraordinary person, it would seem, capable of solving the most complicated mysteries and of succeeding in the most reckless enterprises. A few days after Captain Belval's departure, Monsieur d'Ergemont received from Don Luis Pereira the letter of which I spoke to you, and of which he read us only the beginning. Sir, it said, I look upon the Maguignac incident as more than a little serious, and I beg you, at the least fresh alarm, to telegraph to Patrice Belval. If I can rely upon certain indications, you are standing on the brink of an abyss. But even if you were at the bottom of that abyss, you would have nothing to fear, if only I hear from you in time. From that moment I make myself responsible, whatever happens, even though everything may seem lost and though everything may be lost. As for the riddle of the Godstone, it is simply childish, and I am astonished that, with the very ample data which you gave Belval, it should for an instant be regarded as impossible of explanation. I will tell you in a few words what has puzzled so many generations of mankind. Well, said Veronique, eager to know more. As I said, Monsieur d'Ergemont did not tell us the end of the letter. He read it in front of us, saying, with an air of amazement, "Can that be it? Why, of course it is. How wonderful!" And when we asked him, he said, "I'll tell you all about it this evening, when you come back from the Black Heath. Meanwhile, you may like to know that this most extraordinary man, it's the only word for him, discloses to me, without more ado or further particulars, the secret of the Godstone, and the exact spot where it is to be found. And he does it so logically as to leave no room for doubt. And in the evening, Francois and I were carried off, and Monsieur d'Ergemont was murdered." Veronique paused to think. "I should not be surprised," she said, "if they wanted to steal that important letter from him. For, after all, the theft of the Godstone seems to me the only motive that can explain all the machinations of which we are the victims." "I think so too, but Monsieur d'Ergemont, on Don Luis Pereira's recommendation, tore up the letter before our eyes. So, after all, Don Luis Pereira has not been informed? No. Yet Francois does not know of his grandfather's death, and does not suspect that Monsieur d'Ergemont never heard of our disappearance, and therefore never sent a message to Don Luis Pereira. If he had done so, Don Luis to Francois' mind must be on his way. Besides, Francois has another reason for expecting something, "a serious reason?" No. Francois is still very much of a child. He has read a lot of books of adventure which have worked upon his imagination. Now Captain Belval told him such fantastic stories about his friend Pereira, and painted Pereira in such strange colors, that Francois firmly believes Pereira to be none other than Arsène Lupin. Hence his absolute confidence, and his certainty that, in case of danger, the miraculous intervention will take place at the very minute when it becomes necessary. Veronique could not help smiling. He is a child, of course, but children sometimes have intuitions which we have to take into account. Besides, it keeps up his courage and his spirits. How could he have endured this ordeal at his age if he had not had that hope? Her anguish returned. In a very low voice, she said, "No matter where the rescue comes from, so long as it comes in time, and so long as my son is not the victim of those dreadful creatures." They were silent for a long time. The enemy, present, though invisible, oppressed them with his formidable weight. He was everywhere. He was master of the island, master of the subterranean dwellings, master of the heaths and woods, master of the sea around them, master of the dolmens and the coffins. He linked together the monstrous ages of the past, and the no less monstrous hours of the present. He was continuing history according to the ancient rites and striking blows which had been foretold 1,000 times. But why? With what object? "What does it all mean?" asked Veronique in a disheartened tone. "What connection can there be between the people of today and those of long ago? What is the explanation of the work resumed by such barbarous methods?" And, after a further pause, she said, for in her heart of hearts, behind every question and reply and every insoluble problem, the obsession never ceased to torment her, "Ah, if Francois were here! If we were all three fighting together! What has happened to him? What keeps him in his cell? Some obstacle which he did not foresee?" It was Stéphane's turn to comfort her. "An obstacle? Why should you suppose so? There is no obstacle. But it's a long job." Yes, you are right. A long, difficult job. Oh, I'm sure that he won't lose heart. He has such high spirits. And such confidence. A mother and son who have been brought together cannot be parted again, he said. They may still persecute us, but separate us. Never. We shall win in the end. He was speaking truly, wasn't he, Stéphane? I've not found my son again, have I, only to lose him? No, it would be too unjust, and it would be impossible. Stéphane looked at her, surprised to hear her interrupt herself. Veronique was listening to something. "What is it?" asked Stéphane. "I hear sounds," she said. He also listened. Yes, you're right. "Perhaps it's Francois," she said. "Perhaps it's up there." She moved to rise. He held her back. "No, it's the sound of footsteps in the passage." In that case, said Veronique. They exchanged distraught glances, forming no decision, not knowing what to do. The sound came nearer. The enemy could not be suspecting anything, for the steps were those of one who is not afraid of being heard. Stéphane said slowly, "They must not see me standing up. I will go back to my place. You must fasten me again, as best you can." They remained hesitating, as though cherishing the absurd hope that the danger would pass of its own accord. Then, suddenly, releasing herself from the sort of stupor that seemed to paralyze her, Veronique made up her mind. "Quick! Here they come! Lie down!" He obeyed. In a few seconds, she had replaced the cords on and around him as she had found them, but without tying them. "Turn your face to the rock," she said. "Hide your hands. Your hands might betray you. And you? I shall be all right." She stooped and stretched herself at full length against the door, in which the spy hole, barred with strips of iron, projected inwardly in such a way as to hide her from sight. At the same moment, the enemy stopped outside. Notwithstanding the thickness of the door, Veronique heard the rustle of a dress, and, above her, someone looked in. It was a terrible moment. The least indication would give the alarm. "Oh, why does she stay?" thought Veronique. "Is there anything to betray my presence? My clothes?" She thought that it was more likely Stéphane, whose attitude did not appear natural, and whose bonds did not wear their usual aspect. Suddenly there was a movement outside, followed by a whistle and a second whistle. Then from the far end of the passage came another sound of steps, which increased in the solemn silence and stopped, like the first, behind the door. Words were spoken. Those outside seemed to be concerting measures. Veronique managed to reach her pocket. She took out her revolver and put her finger on the trigger. If anyone entered, she would stand up and fire shot after shot, without hesitating. Would not the least hesitation have meant Francois, death? Chapter 9. The Death Chamber. Veronique's estimate was correct, provided that the door opened outwards, and that her enemies were at once revealed to view. She therefore examined the door and suddenly observed that, against all logical expectation, it had a large, strong bolt at the bottom. Should she make use of it? She had no time to weigh the advantages or drawbacks of this plan. She had heard a jingle of keys and, almost at the same time, the sound of a key grating in the lock. Veronique received a very clear vision of what was likely to happen. When the assailants burst in, she would be thrust aside, she would be hampered in her movements, her aim would be inaccurate, and her shots would miss, whereupon they would shut the door again and promptly hurry off to Francois' cell. The thought of it made her lose her head, and her action was instinctive and immediate. First, she pushed the bolt at the foot of the door. Next, half rising, she slammed the iron shutter over the wicket. A latch clicked. It was no longer possible either to enter or to look in. Then at once she realized the absurdity of her action, which had not opposed any obstacle to the menace of the enemy. Stéphane, leaping to her side, said, "Good heavens, what have you done? Why, they saw that I was not moving, and they now know that I am not alone." "Exactly," she answered, striving to defend herself. "They will try to break down the door, which will give us the time we want." "The time we want for what?" "To make our escape." "Which way?" "Francois will call out to us. Francois will—" She did not complete her sentence. They now heard the sound of footsteps moving swiftly down the passage. There was no doubt about it. The enemy, without troubling about Stéphane, whose flight appeared impossible, was making for the upper floor of cells. Moreover, might he not suppose that the two friends were acting in agreement, and that it was the boy who was in Stéphane's cell and who had barred the door? Veronique, therefore, had precipitated events and given them a turn which she had so many reasons to dread, and Francois, up above, would be caught at the very moment when he was preparing to escape. She was utterly overwhelmed. "Why did I come here?" she muttered. "It would have been so simple to wait. The two of us would have saved you to a certainty." One idea flashed through the confusion of her mind. Had she not sought to hasten Stéphane's release because of what she knew of this man's love for her? And was it not an unworthy curiosity that had prompted her to make the attempt? A horrible idea which she had once rejected, saying, "No, I had to come. It is fate which is persecuting us." "Don't believe it," said Stéphane. "Everything will come right." "Too late," said she, shaking her head. "Why, how do we know that Francois has not left his cell? You yourself thought so just now." She did not reply. Her face became drawn and very pale. By virtue of her sufferings, she had acquired a kind of intuition of the evil that threatened her. This evil now surrounded her on every hand. A second series of ordeals was before her, more terrible than the first. "There's death all about us," she said. He tried to smile. "You are talking like the people of Sarek. You have the same fears. They were right to be afraid, and you yourself feel the horror of it all." She rushed to the door, drew the bolt, tried to open it, but what could she do against that massive, iron-clad door? Stéphane seized her by the arm. "One moment. Listen. It sounds as if—" "Yes," she said, "it's up there that they are knocking, above our heads, in Francois' cell." "Not at all, not at all. Listen." There was a long silence, and then blows were heard in the thickness of the cliff. The sound came from below them. "The same blows that I heard this morning," said Stéphane in dismay. "The same attempt of which I spoke to you. Ah, I understand." "What? What do you mean?" "The blows were repeated, at regular intervals, and then ceased, to be followed by a dull, continuous sound, pierced by shriller creakings and sudden cracks, like the straining of machinery newly started, or of one of those capstans which are used for hoisting boats up a beach." Veronique listened, desperately expectant of what was coming, trying to guess, seeking to find some clue in Stéphane's eyes. He stood in front of her, looking at her as a man, in the hour of danger, looks at the woman he loves. And suddenly she staggered and had to press her hand against the wall. It was as though the cave, and indeed the whole cliff, were bodily moving from its place. "Oh," she murmured, "is it I who am trembling like this? Is it from fear that I am shaking from head to foot?" Seizing Stéphane's hand, she said, Tell me, I want to know." He did not answer. There was no fear in his eyes bedewed with tears. There was nothing but immense love and unbounded despair. He was thinking only of her. Besides, was it necessary for him to explain what was happening? Did not the reality itself become more and more apparent as the seconds passed? A strange reality indeed, having no connection with commonplace facts, a reality quite beyond anything that the imagination might invent in the domain of evil, a strange reality which Veronique, who was beginning to grasp its indications, still refused to believe. Acting like a trapdoor, but like a trapdoor working the reverse way, the square of enormous joists which was set in the middle of the cave rose, pivoting on the fixed axis by which it was hinged parallel with the cliff. The almost imperceptible movement was that of an enormous lid opening, and the thing already formed a sort of springboard, reaching from the edge to the back of the cave, a springboard with as yet a very slight slope, on which it was easy enough to keep one's balance. At the first moment, Veronique thought that the enemy's object was to crush them between the implacable floor and the granite of the ceiling, but, almost immediately afterwards, she understood that the hateful mechanism, by standing erect like a drawbridge when hoisted up, was intended to hurl them over the precipice, and it would carry out that intention inexorably. The result was fatal and inevitable. Whatever they might try, whatever efforts they might make to hold on, a minute would come when the floor of that drawbridge would be absolutely vertical, forming an integral part of the perpendicular cliff. "It's horrible, it's horrible," she muttered. Their hands were still clasped. Stéphane was weeping silent tears. Presently she moaned. "There's nothing to be done, is there?" "Nothing," he replied. "Still, there is room beyond that wooden floor. The cave is round. We might—" "The space is too small. If we tried to stand between the sides of the square and the wall, we should be crushed to death. That has all been planned. I have often thought about it." "Then we must wait." "For what? For whom?" "For Francois." "Oh, Francois," she said with a sob. "Perhaps he too is doomed, or perhaps he is looking for us and will fall into some trap. In any case, I shall not see him. And he will know nothing. And he will not even have seen his mother before dying." She pressed Stéphane's hands and said, "Stéphane, if one of us escapes death, and I hope it may be you—" "It will be you," he said in a tone of conviction. "I am even surprised that the enemy should condemn you to the same torture as myself. But no doubt he doesn't know that it's you who are here with me." "It surprises me too," said Veronique. "A different torture is set aside for me. But what does it matter if I am not to see my son again? Stéphane, I can safely leave him in your charge, can't I? I know all that you have already done for him." The floor continued to rise very slowly, with an uneven vibration and sudden jerks. The slope became more accentuated. A few minutes more, and they would no longer be able to speak freely and quietly. Stéphane replied, "If I survive, I swear to fulfill my task to the end. I swear it in memory." "In memory of me," she said in a firm voice. "In memory of the Veronique whom you knew and loved." He looked at her passionately. "So you know?" "Yes, and I tell you frankly, I have read your diary. I know your love for me, and I accept it." She gave a sad smile. "That poor love which you offered to the woman who was absent, and which you are now offering to the woman who is about to die." "No, no," he said eagerly. "Don't believe that. Salvation may be near at hand. I feel it. My love does not belong to the past, but to the future." He stooped to put his lips to her hands. "Kiss me," she said, offering him her forehead. Each of them had been obliged to place one foot on the brink of the precipice, on the straight edge of granite, which ran parallel with the fourth side of the springboard. They kissed gravely. "Hold me firmly," said Veronique. She leant back as far as she could, raising her head, and called in a muffled voice, "Francois, Francois!" But there was no one at the upper opening. from which the ladder was still hanging by one of its hooks, well out of reach. Veronique bent over the sea. At this spot, the swell of the cliff did not project as much as elsewhere, and she saw, in between the foam-topped reefs, a little pool of still water, very calm and so deep that she could not see the bottom. She thought that death would be gentler there than on the sharp-pointed rocks, and, yielding to a sudden longing to have done with it all, and to avoid a lingering agony, she said to Stéphane, "Why wait for the end? Better die than suffer this torture." "No, no," he exclaimed, horrified at the thought that Veronique might disappear from his sight. "Then you are still hoping?" "Until the last second, since it's your life that's at stake." "I have no longer any hope," nor was he borne up by hope. But he would have given anything to lull Veronique's sufferings and to bear the whole weight of the supreme ordeal himself. The floor continued to rise. The vibration had ceased, and the slope became much more marked, already reaching the bottom of the wicket, halfway up the door. Then there was a sound like a sudden stoppage of machinery, followed by a violent jolt, and the whole wicket was covered. It was becoming impossible for them to stand erect. They lay down on the slanting floor, bracing their feet against the granite edge. 2 more jerks occurred, each time pushing the upper end still higher. The top of the inner wall was reached, and the enormous mechanism moved slowly forward, along the ceiling, towards the opening of the cave. They could see very plainly that it would fit this opening exactly and close it hermetically, like a drawbridge. The rock had been hewn in such a way that the deadly task might be accomplished without leaving any loophole for chance. They did not utter a word. With hands tight clasped, they resigned themselves to the inevitable. Their death was assuming the aspect of an event decreed by destiny. The machine had been constructed far back in the centuries and had no doubt been reconstructed, repaired, and put in order at a more recent date. And during those centuries, worked by invisible executioners, it had caused the death of culprits, of guilty men and innocent, of men of Armorica, Gaul, France, or foreign lands. Prisoners of war, sacrilegious monks, persecuted peasants, renegade Chouans, and soldiers of the Revolution. One by one, the monster had hurled them over the cliff. Today it was their turn. They had not even the bitter solace of rage and hatred. Whom were they to hate? They were dying in the deepest obscurity, with no hostile face emerging from that implacable night. They were dying in the accomplishment of a task unknown to themselves, to make up a total, so to speak, and for the fulfillment of absurd prophecies, of imbecile intentions, such as the orders given by the barbarian gods and formulated by fanatical priests. They were, it was a thing unheard of, the victims of some expiatory sacrifice, of some holocaust offered to the divinities of a bloodthirsty creed. The wall stood behind them. In a few more minutes, it would be perpendicular. The end was approaching. Time after time, Stéphane had to hold Veronique back. An increasing terror distracted her mind. She yearned to fling herself down. "Please, please," she stammered. "Do let me. I am suffering more than I can bear." Had she not found her son again, she would have retained her self-control to the end. But the thought of Francois was unsettling her. The boy must also be a prisoner. They must be torturing him too and immolating him, like his mother, on the altars of the execrable gods. "No, no, he will come," Stéphane declared. "You will be saved. I will have it so. I know it." She replied wildly, "He is imprisoned as we are. They are burning him with torches, driving arrows into him, tearing his flesh. Oh, my poor little son." "He will come, dear. He told you he would. Nothing can separate a mother and son who have been brought together again. We have found each other in death. We shall be united in death. I wish it might be at once. I don't want him to suffer." The agony was too great. With an effort, she released her hands from Stéphane's and made a movement to fling herself down, but she immediately threw herself back against the drawbridge with a cry of amazement which was echoed by Stéphane. Something had passed before their eyes and disappeared again. It came from the left. "The ladder!" exclaimed Stéphane. "It's the ladder, isn't it?" "Yes, it's Francois," said Véronique, catching her breath with joy and hope. "He is saved. He is coming to rescue us." At that moment, the wall of torment was almost upright, vibrating implacably beneath their shoulders. The cave no longer existed behind them. The depths had already claimed them. At most, they were clinging to a narrow ledge. Véronique leant outwards again. The ladder swung back, and then became stationary, fixed by its two hooks. Above them, at the opening in the cliff, was a boy's face, and the boy was smiling and making gestures. "Mother, mother, quick!" The call was eager and urgent. The two arms were outstretched towards the pair below. Véronique moaned, "Oh, it's you, my darling! Quick, mother, I'm holding the ladder. Quick! It's quite safe." "I'm coming, darling, I'm coming." She had seized the nearest upright. This time, with Stéphane's assistance, she had no difficulty in placing her foot on the bottom rung. But she said, "And you, Stéphane? You're coming with me, aren't you?" "I have plenty of time," he said. "Hurry." "No, you must promise." "I swear." "Hurry." She climbed 4 rungs and stopped. "Are you coming, Stéphane?" He had already turned towards the cliff and slipped his left hand into a narrow fissure which remained between the drawbridge and the rock. His right hand reached the ladder and he was able to set foot on the lowest rung. He too was saved. With what delight Véronique covered the rest of the distance. What mattered the void below her, now that her son was there, waiting for her to clasp him to her breast at last. Here I am, she said. "Here I am, my darling." She swiftly put her head and shoulders in the window. He pulled her through, and she climbed over the ledge. At last she was with her son. They flung themselves into each other's arms. "Oh, mother, mother, is it really true? Mother!" But she had no sooner closed her arms about him than she drew back a little, she did not know why. An inexplicable discomfort checked her first outburst. "Come here," she said, dragging him to the light of the window. "Come and let me look at you." The boy did as she wished. She examined him for 2 or 3 seconds, no longer, and suddenly, giving a start of terror, ejaculated, "Then it's you? It's you, the murderer?" Oh, horror! She was once more looking on the face of the monster who had killed her father and Honorine before her eyes. "So you know me?" he chuckled. Véronique realized her mistake from the boy's very tone. This was not Francois but the other, the one who had played his devilish part in the clothes which Francois usually wore. He gave another chuckle. "Ah, you're beginning to see things as they are, ma'am. You know me now, don't you?" The hateful face contracted, became wicked and cruel, animated by the vilest expression. Vorsky, stammered Véronique. "It's Vorsky I recognize in you." He burst out laughing. "Why not? Do you think I'm going to disown my father as you did?" "Vorsky's son! His son!" Véronique repeated. "Lord bless me, yes, his son. Why shouldn't I be? Surely the good fellow had the right to have 2 sons. Me first and dear Francois next." "Vorsky's son!" Véronique exclaimed once more. "And one of the best, I tell you, ma'am, a worthy son of his father, and brought up on the highest principles. I've shown you as much already, haven't I? But it's not finished. We're only at the beginning. Here, would you like me to give you a fresh proof? Just take a squint at that stick in the mud of a tutor. No, but look how things go when I take a hand in them." He sprang to the window. Stéphane's head appeared. The boy picked up a stone and struck with all his might, throwing him backwards. Véronique, who at the first moment had hesitated, not realizing the danger, now rushed and seized the boy's arm. It was too late. The head vanished. The hooks of the ladder slipped off the ledge. There was a loud cry, followed by the sound of a body falling into the water below. Véronique ran to the window. The ladder was floating on the part of the little pool which she was able to see, lying motionless in its frame of rocks. There was nothing to point to the place where Stéphane had fallen, not an eddy, not a ripple. She called out, "Stéphane! Stéphane!" No reply, nothing but the great silence of space in which the winds are still and the sea asleep. "You villain! What have you done?" she cried. "Don't take on, missus," he said. "Master Stéphane brought up your kid to be a duffer. Come, it's a laughing matter, it is, really. Give us a kiss, won't you, daddy's missus? But, I say, what a face you're pulling. Surely you don't hate me as much as all that?" He went up to her, with his arms outstretched. Veronique swiftly covered him with her revolver. Be off, or I'll kill you as I would a mad dog. Be off." The boy's face became more inhuman than ever. He fell back step by step, snarling. "Oh, I'll make you pay for this, my pretty lady. What do you mean by it? I come up to give you a kiss. I'm full of kindly feelings, and you want to shoot me. You shall pay for it in blood. In nice red flowing blood. Blood. Blood." Quote. He seemed to love the sound of the word. He repeated it time after time, then once more gave a burst of evil laughter and fled down the tunnel which led to the priory, shouting, "The blood of your son, Mother Veronique! The blood of your darling Francois!